Hey guys, I'm JanetOnOccasion, and today we are looking at a roster reveal, actually in person, for a bunch of the units in Grand Cathay, but not all of them. Not all of them. Okay, this isn't all of the units. This is just a bit of footage I got sent by CA, alright, along with a bunch of stuff I'll be showing you over the next couple of days. But this is just a selection of units. Obviously it doesn't have all the legendary lords, doesn't have all the heroes, so bear that in mind. So, let's go back to the beginning. So I am looking at a video file. This is in 1080p, by the way, rather than the usual 2K that I'm recording in. So if you think this doesn't quite look good enough for 2K, it's because it isn't. So, first off, we have the Jade Warriors. I think these look brilliant. I think these look really great. And you can see they can hide in forests. What was that first skill they had? Let's go back again. I have the power to do that, you see. This is a video. I want to make it very clear I'm not doing this live. So here they have formation attack. The unit will try to stay in formation when in melee, which is an interesting note, because that's not something that we've had before in Total War Warhammer. Usually they just charge in, but the idea that this will stay regimented, I think is a really interesting one, and it's interesting that it actually gives you a note on that, because that really shows a difference between the sort of unregimented units they're going to charge in all willy-nilly and just get in wherever they can to get attacks on the enemy, and the ones that will literally just let the front line attack and only bother to change up the formation when losses occur. I think that's a really interesting thing. So purely on defensive, so fewer of their units will be in contact with the enemy, which means they'll be doing less damage, but they'll also be taking less damage, because that's what they're there for. They're there to hold the line. So I think that's a really cool thing that is indicative of a lot of changes in Warhammer 3, I think. So definitely worth mentioning. Also, it says at the top of their unit. Oh, by the way, I've made my cursor all big, so you know that it's mine. So Harmony Yang is really useful. It actually tells us what it is as well, but I like that it gives you a little note at the top. Because, of course, with Cathay, Yang and Yin units will buff each other if they're within proximity. So here, leadership +6 up to 12, and melee defense +6 up to 12. It's enabled if a Yin unit is nearby. Activates when within 35 meters of a Yin unit. So real close. That is not very far at all. That is really, really close. So they really do have to be in formation with that unit, which I think is interesting. So it really emphasizes being in formation rather than just sort of having your one token Yin unit to buff all your Yang units, which I like, honestly. I think this sort of promotes you, being more regimented again, which again helps with their formation, ability there, which I think is really cool. So the effect intensity increases by highest nearby harmony multiplier on a unit. So more, different units will have a higher multiplier. So I think that's really interesting. So it also shows the quality of the unit will have an impact on this stuff. So you can't just have one cheap Yin unit to buff your entire Yang, elite Yang army, So it's good. I think this keeps variety in mind, which I really like. So that's really fun. I like that a lot. And yes, we will be, speeding up as we go along. So these are the Halberd unit. And actually, just a quick note on these last guys. If we quickly just see their stats. So here you can see melee attack and melee defense are both quite low, right? 24 melee attack, 36 melee defense. So not massive stats. Quite high leadership though, and armor at 80. And with that formation thing, they are a very defensive unit, even with the slightly lower melee defense, but this could be indicative of all units in Warhammer 3. I think it's important to get that out of the way too, because we don't know what the stat lines are like in Warhammer 3. We haven't seen any of the Warhammer 2 units in Warhammer 3. We don't know if it's going to be consistent, right? Every stat we know in Warhammer 2, you can throw out the window, okay? It's indicative of what the unit is designed to do, but it isn't indicative of what the stat line will be for any of these things. The stat lines are irrelevant. They're all on different curves now. We have no idea how they'll actually fit in, and what a huge amount of melee defense and what a low amount of melee defense truly is, for the calculations that Warhammer 3 is using, because we don't know those either. So bear that in mind as we go through these. And here we have the Jade Warriors with Halberds. So, of course, Jade Warriors normally sort of fit that sort of swordsman role with pretty good armor, whereas the Halberds are an anti-large version. They've got that charge defense and charge reflection, which is new. So charge reflection is really nice, so when they're attacked by enemy cavalry, so long as they're braced, they will actually sort of reflect some of the damage back onto the enemies. So from what I understand, is actually a static amount. So if you have charge deflection of 5, if something charges into you, they take 5 damage, you know, per unit that they charge into, rather than it being a percentage of the charge bonus, right? So the better something is at charging doesn't mean the more damage it'll take necessarily. But that charge reflection will go up higher for better units. So if you have a more elite unit, it's going to reflect more of the charge back on its enemy, which I believe that's the current implementation, but that can change. That can change in the next, 3 months till launch? So bear that in mind. So more Yang as well, and actually I didn't catch that that ability, defensive stance. So this is another stance that they have. Ah, yes, this was mentioned in the Cathay roster reveal, which is really interesting. So this is a charge resistance bonus, but it's tiered. So it actually lets them sort of dig in. So the longer they're not moving, the more they can dig in and get more bonuses, which I think is really interesting because it sort of encourages this very intentional movement. You know, you want to place a unit there knowing that you're not going to move it again. You want to be very dedicated to the choices you make, which I think is really interesting. So there's not going to be a lot of sort of flitting back and forth, constantly reacting to things. So if you actually sort of keep Cathay on their feet a lot, they aren't going to get those bonuses, which I think is really good. So they're sort of very good at holding fast, but if you make them move, then hopefully you can trip them up, which I think is really cool. I think it's really fun. And I think it's very thematic. I think it makes sense. I think a lot of sort of human factions and even the dwarfs can sort of benefit from that kind of implementation, you know, making people sort of hold fast. So here we have charge defense again. These are the Celestial Dragon Guard, which are Halberd units, and they look fantastic. They look absolutely amazing. And again, they have Battle Yang Harmony. And if we have a look, these are elite units and only 43 melee defense, which is much lower than, you know, the likes of sort of Phoenix Guard, and even just basic Empire Spearmen have melee defense that's near that. The High Elf Spearmen, they have like 50 melee. Excuse me, they have like 50 melee defense, which is crazy. So melee defense is clearly a lot lower in this game than in Warhammer 2. They've clearly lowered those numbers, and I think that's for a few things which we'll get into when we actually look at some of the battle footage in other videos. But I think battles have slowed down somewhat. I think the damage calculations are slower, and I think that means that lower melee defense is a way to sort of balance that out. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, pretty cool looking. And actually, what was that last ability? Oh, that was just more Yang, and I just went back to the very start of the video. Hang on. So yes, that's Yang again. So pretty good stuff. I like the look of them for sure. And 100 in a unit is a pretty big unit. And then 120 for the Peasant Archers here. So Peasant Archers, you can see their baseline stats, 22 ammunition, 140 range, so that's also in meters. So when you think that they have a range of 140, which is actually quite low for archers, 35 meters is how close something has to be to get the benefit of Yin or Yang, you know, of that harmony buff. So yeah, well within range of peasant bowmen. So pretty cool. Also 15 missile strength, but 120 in a unit. That's similar to goblins. You know, very high unit counts. I believe this is on large unit count, by the way. Large unit sizes. They're expendable, so if they die, no one will bat an eyelid. Brilliant. And specifically expendable if a unit is routing. If it's counted as expendable, then nearby units won't have a debuff to their leadership associated with routing units. They are expected to rout, so other units do not mind, unless they too are expendable, in which case they do. So pretty simple unit, Peasant Archers. Here we have the Jade Warrior Crossbowmen with shields. I really like the look of these. These look really cool. I love the idea of a sort of a uniform for the entire sort of regiment, battalion, I guess class of unit, I don't know. Jade Warriors, you know, and then Jade Warriors encompass the whole professional army, basically. You know, all the town guard and everything, they're all Jade Warriors, so they have a range of different equipment, and you get to see those sort of varieties of them. But I like that consistent role that they all play as sort of, you know, peacekeepers, defenders of each commandery. I think they look really cool, and I like that uniformity with this sort of, you know, grand imperial army. It's very cool. So range 140, which is better than the peasant bowmen, of course, and they have 21 missile strength instead of the 15, so they are a big upgrade from that. Very low combat stats in melee, but they do still have that 80 armor, which means they should match up brilliantly against a lot of other ranged units that don't have the armor piercing. So against sort of other peasants and things, they should do really well. They should be more accurate too. But, you know, better range, a lot more armor. There's only 90 of them rather than 120, but you know, those extra bonuses should go a long way. So they can hide in forests, of course. Defensive stance, so if they're braced, they get that extra armor as well. And what is really nice here, Yin, they have extra reload skill as their bonus. So other Yang units are nearby. These Yin units will get extra reload skill and leadership. So they'll be able to stand their ground better and they'll be able to get shots off quicker. I guess they're less focused on, you know, trying to make sure there's nothing sneaking up on them with a lance or something. So pretty cool stuff. Next up, we have the Crane Gunners. So the Crane Gunners, very, very cool. Could, in fact, be where the Skaven were inspired for the Warplock Giselles, you know, from these Crane Gunners. But they look great, you know, obviously very similar to Warplock Giselles. But they look fantastic. They look really, really cool. And that Silver Shield really helps them against other ranged units. You know, anything that might harass the front line, any sort of, you know, vanguarding skirmishers aren't going to be able to pick these guys off in a big hurry, you know, before the battle starts. So really cool to see. So they can hide in forests, and of course they have Yin, so extra reload skill is going to be incredibly useful on these guys because they've got pretty huge missile strength at 33, some good armor piercing, and they have shield breaker, which means they'll synergize really well with all the other ranged units in the army, of which there are quite a few. There are quite a few, but putting missile block chance down by 24 is very, very good, and range of 275 is obviously massive. Not quite as much as some of the, you know, better artillery pieces. And let's see, 30 of that 33 is armor-piercing missile damage, which is very nice. So yeah, very capable-looking unit there. And then we have the Fire Rain rockets. So these look amazing, driven by those oxen. They look incredible. Obviously, got to be shaped like big old dragon faces. If you can have something that spews fire, you've got to evoke your masters, don't you? It's the only way. So here, missile strength 622, range 360, which is obviously a lot more than their, not Giselles, their crane guns. Their battle harmony is Yin. They have siege attacker, of course, because they're artillery pieces. So it means they don't have to wait around to build siege equipment to siege somewhere. And here we have the Grand Cannons, again, pulled by these oxen. They look great, by the way. I can't stress how much I love the fact that Warhammer 3 is giving us way more sort of variety in terms of beasts of burden. I know that seems like a weird comment to make, but I do like the idea of each culture having its own way to sort of move this stuff. It adds a lot of flavour, I think, to the faction. They could just have the cannon idle and the people push it around, but no, they have oxen. Oxen being, you know, a local beast of burden, which I think is really cool. And we have bears for Kislev, which is a little bit more exotic, but again, you use what you have. You know, it adds a lot of flavour to a faction, so I love that. So Siege Attacker, absolutely fantastic. And again, harmony is Yin. So their stats are pretty damn good. So their ammunition is fire ammunition. These are like flame cannons of the Dawi, which again makes sense. If you're going to have these big projectiles, you're going to evoke, you know, you're going to evoke your masters. You know, they really look up to the dragons and will try and emulate them any way they can. So 450 range is far better than the crane guns, and it is better than the other ones, isn't it? Hang on. So yeah, 360 are the Fire Rain rockets. And the Grand Cannons, similar range to Great Cannons, but we don't exactly know what the stats will be in Warhammer 3 for all the Warhammer 2 artillery pieces. So we can't make direct comparisons yet. So, let's crack on. Yeah, you can go a little faster. Alright, what is next? Next up we have the Terracotta Sentinel. Yep, better zoom up a bit there. Thank you. So the Terracotta Sentinel, you can see 530 weapon strength. Most of that is going to be, well, more than 50% is armor piercing. They have magic damage on their melee attack as well, which should help them, you know, fighting demons and the like. 100 armor, 100 leadership, though the 100 leadership is just indicative that it's unbreakable, which we can see in its abilities. Very low charge bonus, and yep, Terracotta Sentinel, just like the ones that are terrain pieces on the maps. Also, shout out to the map. Lovely map. I love the look of it. And I also love these, and once again, we're using the big cursor. I'm glad I made my cursor all big. It's useful here. So these walls are very, very cool. The fact there's so few windows, it feels incredibly oppressive, but there is a lot of beauty here. So from a distance, it's still going to look beautiful, but when you're along the streets, it's actually very oppressive. This is a theme which I have seen constantly throughout, but of course all the sort of fluff surrounding the faction is it's basically reads like propaganda for the faction. That's how every faction's sort of descriptions tend to be. But I love this very oppressive sort of building where no one is getting in or out if if the masters say, you know, unless the masters say so, I guess, which I think is really good. Very impressive architecture, while still being beautiful, you know. So anyway, Terracotta Sentinel. Love the animations, them twirling their things around is amazing. So cause fear and terror? Yeah, obviously, look at it. You don't want to mess with this. So very good to see. It is unbreakable, so it's never going to run away, and wounds. So this is something we'll see on basically all single model entities in Warhammer 3. So now, if an enemy has taken a lot of damage, it will be debuffed, right? If something is injured, it will act as such. Because currently in Warhammer 2, a lot of the time you just ignore the single model entities because you know they're going to take a lot of hits before they go down, and you can just distract them with something cheap while you focus on, you know, other units that are going to have a more direct impact on the flow of battle, whereas the single model entities, they are basically as effective when they are almost dead as they are with full health, so you know that all that damage isn't actually ruining the enemy's chances of hurting you, you know? Whereas now, you can actually debuff the enemy by damaging them, so it feels a lot more realistic, and it kind of rewards you for attacking the single model entities rather than leaving them to last and letting them break. Obviously, they're not all unbreakable like the Terracotta Sentinel, but it's nice to know that your damage will actually impact the unit you're damaging, like it does with, you know, cavalry or infantry or whatever, where you do damage, they lose models, they become less, you know, they have less potential to hurt you with fewer models. So that all applies. Here, now it does to single models because they've added this wound ability, so I really like that. That I think is really good. And yeah, it's harmony as well of Yang. Then we have the sky junk, so let's get to that. Up in the sky. So these things are way bigger than I thought they'd be. They are actually, like, real sizable on the battlefield. You really notice their presence a huge amount. So obviously, they're flying. That's something we should point out. 80 armor, not the hugest. They don't have any sort of shields or anything. They don't have any missile resist there, just the armor. They also have 80 leadership, which is pretty high. 30 speed is pretty damn slow. That's slower than some, like, quite a lot of infantry. Quite a lot of infantry are faster than that. That's how slow this is. So, very, very slow indeed. Rubbish in melee, so if you surround it with flying units like harpies or anything like that, you could probably take it down pretty damn quickly. So that is something you definitely want to keep an eye on. And if you are using a sky junk, you're definitely going to want to have your own ranged units to try and make sure that harpies and similar units can't get rid of these sky junks in a hurry. You're definitely going to want it to be protected. But this thing has good range at 360, and 622 missile strength is gigantic. And exploding ammunition, or is that just simply fire? Either way, it's pretty awesome. It also has this sky junk bomb, so if it can make it to the front line, or if you're playing Cathay more defensively, as it seems to be encouraging, if the enemy has gotten to your front line, you know, a lot less distance to travel, then you can start dropping these bombs, which is very cool. So you get 3 bombs that you can drop on the enemies, which seems to do pretty good amount of damage. I mean, that's going to be, you know, the explosive damage there of 100 and the range damage of 140. That initial hit will do some good damage, and then the explosive damage will obviously hit a bunch of units. So the higher the model count of what you're bombing, the more damage you're going to end up doing, which is very cool. Flavor text is nice too. Control the skies above the battlefield, and you can be assured of success upon the ground below. Gravity is your ally, remember. Very cool stuff. The sky junk bomb. I like to see it. And there's the active ability. Just click it to use it. Always flying. So this unit is always flying and cannot land, which again is incredibly unique. We haven't got any units like that. Even things like gyro bombers have a melee attack that they can just like dive in and start attacking things. I don't know if that'll change for this game. I feel like if this is going to be a trend, that yeah, the gyro bombers and gyrocopters of the dwarfs maybe need to be given this as well, because they always looked a bit weird. Diving into the enemy and spinning around like that. But hey, maybe people want to keep that. I think it's pretty silly, but silly's fine, but it would also be silly if the sky junk ran in, and I think that would also be fine, but they're not doing that. So it's hard to know what the correct answer is here, you know? But that is interesting, see an always flying unit. Also, Eye of the Dragon. So forest spotting, plus 100%, so it's much better at spotting things in forests, which I think is great. I think that's a really fun idea, that they can literally be placed near a forest and be able to really see what's hiding in there and allow your other units to take advantage of that extra sight. I think that's really fun. It means that it's a decent support unit, which is interesting. We haven't really had a unit that's good for that sort of thing. Usually you just throw, you know, whatever unit in there to have a look. They wouldn't necessarily be good at it, but you just get in the forest and try and spot things. But this guy actually has a talent for it, which I think is really cool. So the higher you go, the further you can see. Like, there's dragons in flight above Cathay's harmonious landscape. And passive ability, wounds, so it's a single model entity, so if it takes a lot of damage, it'll start doing less damage. But it's a bit of a weird one, because yes, the speed will be lower, but the base weapon damage and armor-piercing weapon damage don't really apply to this at all, you know, because they're not really going to be in melee, right? Hopefully, anyway. So it doesn't... It's just a universal thing, but I don't think that'll really be one you have to consider with the Sky Junk. And then Yin Harmony, of course, so the extra reload skill and leadership.
The Celestial Faithful!
Then we have the Sky Lantern, which is a slightly different one. So this one, it can fire while moving, which is lovely to see. It is always firing. Sorry, always flying, not always firing. It's always flying, just like the other one. Eye of the Dragon, good at spotting. It has wounds, and it has Battle Harmony of Yin. So let's have a look at its stats. Ammunition of 80 compared to its buddy, who has... nope, that's the Sky Lantern again. The Sky Junk, who has, let's see, 15 ammunition, which is very little, actually. That is very little for the Sky Junk, but of course it can drop bombs, which is quite nice. And this one has, yeah, lower missile strength, but it can attack more, and it does have Shield Breaker. So this is very much, the Sky Lantern is very much like a mobile version of the Crane Gunners. They do have Crane Guns on them, so that would make sense. But it's good to see that it's very much just that directly while being a nice scout, and it can stay out of the way of most combat. It does have a lot less armor at 30, though, compared to the 80 of its big brother, the Sky Junk. But yeah, it looks pretty cool, I'd say. So let's skip ahead a bit. And is there anything left? There's the Alchemist. So this Alchemist is Law of Metal, as you can see from its spells on the bottom right. And weapon strength 300, 15 charge bonus, 30 melee defense, 35 magical melee attack, speed of 34, leadership 60, armor 15. What I'm basically describing is a spellcaster. It's all the same there. But there's some interesting stuff here, such as the tooltip at the top, which says Harmony Amplifier plus 25%, which is very cool. So here, Alchemist Elixir of Iron Skin, range of 100 meters, which isn't huge, but it gives plus 90 armor to a unit, which is gigantic for 25 seconds. That's a big boost to their armor, for sure. And you can do that every 90 seconds, it would seem. Oh, use is 1. Okay, that cooldown. Perhaps it takes 90 seconds before you can use it once, or maybe it's upgradable, we'll see. So, to be a Cathayan alchemist for the disapproving masses takes a thick skin, but the reddish liquid within this phial goes far beyond that. Very cool stuff. Then we have the Alchemist's Elixir of Puissance, which gives plus 40 melee attack for 29 seconds. Again, short range, but that is, again, a big bonus. So very powerful tools at this Alchemist's disposal. And I also love that alchemy, you know, Law of Metal is obviously intrinsically linked to alchemy and similar themes to alchemy, but I like that they've given them a bunch of like lotions and potions as well to sort of play into that. There's, you know, stuff they made earlier. It's their profession, after all. So I do like they're leaning into that. So the fighting prowess of Cathay's greatest can be taken in draft form when a further burst of aggression is needed to tip the balance in the Celestial Emperor's favour. Then we have Enchanted Metallurgy. So Imbuement gives her magical attacks. Also base weapon damage and base missile damage go up by 30% and 25%. Lasts for 18 seconds. 100 meter range. So yeah, she can give people magic damage, which I think is really good. Again, just really useful buffs. I really like this. I like this a lot. And this one doesn't seem to be confined by uses. This can be used as many times as you like by the looks of it. So the science by which metals are extracted from their ores can be charged by magic and given purpose in war to devastating effect. Marvellous. Then Searing Doom, obviously you know the spell Searing Doom, Plague of Rust, Gehenna's Golden Hounds, Glittering Robe, Final Transmutation, Transmutation of Lead, then Encourage because they're a hero, they can hide, Mastery of Elemental Winds. You're not going to tell me more? When more than one unit that share this attribute are in the same army, the power of spells cast is increased. So it'd be nice if it told us specifically what that meant, but that's really cool to see. Maybe it will actually give us more detail if there was a second spellcaster here. But I do like that with Cathay, that having more than one unit, more than one spellcaster, makes each individual spellcaster better. Because generally, you don't want to have more than one spellcaster because they have to share the winds of magic. So yes, you get a bit more utility, but it's a sort of wasted points, you know, spent either, you know, in multiplayer points spent or just an extra slot that you could fill with something else. Sure, there's campaign items and all the rest of it. You can just level up beyond any reasonable, you know, amount of Winds of Magic on the campaign map with a bunch of different augmenting items and skill points and things. But generally speaking, more than one spellcaster in an army is kind of, you know, wasted potential for either of them. This might change that. And wounds, because it's a single model, even though it's just one person, you know, it can still be wounded. They have a big health pool being a hero, and so wounds does apply to them too. Then metal shifting, of course, is the lore attribute, which I think is really nice to see. If we can get another look at that. So that extra 13-second sort of effect that triggers whenever they cast a spell for that extra armor piercing and base weapon damage is always really useful. Always really useful to see that. And then missile resistance 15%, which is normal for all heroes. And there we see the skills that we looked at earlier. And then finally, we have Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon. Currently on foot, she of course can turn into a dragon, so she doesn't need a mount. So melee attack and melee defense much higher than we've seen so far with 65 and 55. And Wrath of the Storm, imbuement of magical attacks and melee attack plus 24. So effect range of 35 meters, so she's giving this to somebody else, which is really, really cool. And it's an area effect, which is cool, so she can buff a bunch of nearby units. I believe it's 35 meters from herself. I think she is the target of it, and it's within range of herself. So anyone that she's fighting toe-to-toe with will get that benefit, which is very, very cool. And it lasts for 32 seconds, which is really rather impressive. Elements thought uncontrollable can be harnessed to do the dragon's bidding, both to crush their enemies and protect them when in human form. Transformation of the dragon. I love her idle animations, just like making lightning in her hands and things. It's very, very cool. Very scary. So, can use if battle has started. So, you can't start the battle in dragon form, is what it's getting at. So, you know. So, you can transform it into dragon form, and form offers powerful melee attacks and flight. Miao Ying has the innate ability to transmogrify from human form to dragon, and back again at will, and often at the most opportune moments. Now we have Earthblood, so she has some Law of Life magic there, which is very, very cool. Storm of Shadows, so this is the Law of Yin that we haven't really had a good look at just yet. But I like the fact that she's got that sort of hybrid sort of, you know, caster thing. She's got a nice mix of spells. I think that's really fun. So, ghostly shadows spring from the caster's outstretched arms, enveloping the foe in dancing shades that make their footing uncertain and their vision confounded by the gloom. Flesh to Stone, we all know Flesh to Stone, although, if we go back to that, Flesh to Stone is now physical resist plus 60%. Flesh to Stone is traditionally something that provides armour, so that's interesting to see. Missile Mirror, so this is a very interesting spell. So this one redirects projectiles back towards the firing unit. So you can literally just target a missile unit, and if you're getting shot at, the missiles will head back. This works on things like magic missiles, and possibly even just like crossbow bolts and things, which would be really interesting to see. I think there'll be some really fun applications of this, especially considering the fact that if you're a big dragon, you're going to be a big target for a bunch of artillery and missile units. So put on that missile mirror, and hey, you might be able to shove a bunch of that damage back at the enemy. The more they focus on you, the more damage you can do to them in kind, which I think is a really interesting spell. I think this is going to be a real game changer in a lot of cases, especially with units like what's it called? The Luminarch of Hysh. You know, something that has like a long wind-up time you can see coming and does like over 1,000 damage. To be able to just turn that around on your enemy, I think is really fun. This could be some really like just high-level gameplay exploiting the crap out of this. It's going to be really exciting stuff, I think. So, a magical of shifting darkness. What? Well, let's roll with it. A magical of shifting darkness and howling wind snatches the enemy's missiles from the air, even as they are fired, and hurls them back at their owners. Really, really cool. Really unique addition there. Then regrowth, of course, is another heal, another big heal. Talons of Night. So this one, damage per second, so it's a vortex spell. Oh, we will get to see this in action, hopefully. But yeah, this is a cool spell. Big, like, dragon talons come out the ground, and they move around like dwellers below, just sort of like attacking everything within range. It's very, very cool. So huge stationary area of effect, a big damaging sort of area spell. And it says a vortex, but it's stationary, so you know. Then siege attacker, encourage, hide in forest, mastery of elemental winds, which again, so there are 2 spellcasters here, because Miao Ying and the other spellcaster, but it doesn't exactly tell you what happens with this, which I think is a bit of a shame. But also worth having a look at the top in her little description. Harmony amplifier plus 100%. So if she's nearby, then people get the full bonus from harmony, which is interesting. So having your leader there is going to help you a lot. And then wounds, of course. Disdain of the Dragons. So this has an area of effect of 35 meters. If a unit is not a lord or hero, then they will suffer this -8 melee attack, which is really cool to see. So only when things can fight on her level, when they're a lord or hero, will they not be debuffed by this, which I think is very, very cool. Everyone else will struggle to attack her, which is really rather interesting. It means you really have to assassinate her with your elite units, with your lords and heroes, rather than relying on just mobbing her with a bunch of halberds or something. Very cool to see. Life Bloom, so every time she casts a spell, everyone's going to get a bit of magic, but also, a bit of health back, but also Power of Yin, which is the lore attribute of the lore of Yin. So she gets both lore attributes, which I think is really good. That is really brilliant in a hybrid spellcaster to get both attributes. And here you can see every time she casts a spell, not only will her own army heal a bit, but also the enemy army will suffer -15 armor and -10% speed. And this will trigger every time she casts a spell, which I think is jolly handy. Also Arcane Conduit, so power recharge will go up by 40%. Which is nice to see. And this is a passive ability. That's just going to be running in the background generally. It's not something you have to click at the moment. I say at the moment, because in Warhammer 2, you had to click Arcane Conduit, and then Greater Arcane Conduit, you didn't. It looks like Arcane Conduit is just a passive bonus in the background generally now, which honestly I think is simpler, so fair enough. Missile resistance plus 15%, and spell resistance 25%. Let's take a quick look at that spell resistance and see the description, because now it used to be magic resistance would be spells and magic damage, but now that's been split up for Warhammer 3. So there's an additional damage type. So where there used to be 1 damage type, there's 2 damage types, and resistances to match the damage. So the damage of spells and magical abilities reduced by this amount. So it's important to know. It's important to know that. And then the battle begins, which means we get to see her turn into a dragon. In a second. Love the voice lines. Very, very good stuff. Let's speed this up. Thank you. And what is nice as well, you can see at the top, right, this is ticking up. So supplies are going up as the time is moving along, because all of the capture points are in control, and this is putting up supplies. This is a nice little, what happens in siege battles now, which is cool. So you can spend those on various things, which hopefully we'll see. So here's the transformation. It was quite arduous, and oh, there she is. Hi. Hey there, dragon. So she looks absolutely fantastic, and I think that may change some of her abilities, perchance. Let's have a look. So it seems to be the same melee stats, but I think her weapon strength has gone up. Her armor has got up to 100, which is significant. Her charge bonus is 50 now. And so just running it from the beginning again, so you can look at that. So that's the roster, but not all of the roster. I believe that's all the units. Oh, actually no, it doesn't have the any of the cavalry. None of the cavalry is present in this, but this is all I can show you currently. But it's a good chunk. It's a good chunk of stuff, and I'm glad that CA sent me this. So yeah, thank you to Creative Assembly and to their wizards in the background recording all this footage for us content creators. It's great to see. It is really good to see. And remember guys, this is in development, so a lot of this is bound to change, but let me know what you think of all the units. Of course, the specific stats, we cannot hazard a guess as to what those stats, how they stack up to anything. So there's no need to go, oh, I think the melee defense is a little low. Yeah, we don't know what the normal is in this game. All the stat lines are going to be changing because it's a whole new game. They tinker with this stuff completely. So we don't know what the norm is, so it's hard to judge. But we can compare these units against the other units in the roster, and we can we can figure out what each unit is used for within this roster. But to match it up to anything else that we know from Warhammer 2 is just a waste of time. So there's really no need for that. But, yeah, I think it's interesting to see. I think this is very interesting stuff to see. So guys, if you enjoyed this, please do comment, like, and subscribe. And let me know what you think. See you in the next one, guys. Have a good one.